Augusta National has a way of generating stories that extend far beyond the scorecard, and this week is delivering one of those stories in real time. Rory McIlroy sits atop the leaderboard heading into the weekend, playing some of the most controlled and confident golf we have seen from him at this particular venue in years. His approach play has been sharp, his course management has been thoughtful, and his composure under the specific pressures that Augusta applies to every player who walks through those gates has been, frankly, remarkable. On paper, this looks like a straightforward narrative about a great player finally putting it all together at the one major that had eluded him. But underneath that clean surface narrative, something else is developing, and it deserves a serious and honest conversation. Multiple players in the field, speaking without attribution, have raised concerns about the level of access Rory had to Augusta National in the months preceding this tournament. According to several sources, he received invitations from club members to play private rounds on the course on multiple occasions before tournament week arrived. Again, this is not a rules violation. Nothing about what is being described falls outside what is permissible. But permissible and equal are two very different things. And that distinction is precisely what is generating friction among players, who feel the gap between those two words is wider than it should be at a major championship. To appreciate why this matters, you have to understand what Augusta National actually represents from a purely competitive standpoint. It is not a course that rewards raw talent alone. It is a course that rewards knowledge, specifically the kind of deeply internalized, experiential knowledge that only comes from repeated time on those grounds. The greens at Augusta operate differently than any other putting surfaces in professional golf. The slopes, the grain, the speed, the way the ball releases off certain portions of the green and checks up on others, none of that can be fully absorbed from watching tournament footage or studying diagrams. You have to stand on those surfaces, hit shots into those positions, and read those putts under conditions that approximate what you will face during the actual event. Every additional round at Augusta before the tournament is not simply practice. It is a competitive investment, and the returns on that investment show up when the pressure is highest and the margins are smallest. When you watch. Rory played this week with that understanding in mind. The comfort he is displaying takes on additional dimension. He is not just playing well. He is playing like someone who belongs on this course at this moment. Like someone for whom the variables that make Augusta unpredictable for others have become familiar and manageable. That is what repeated exposure produces, and that is exactly what the players raising concerns are pointing to. Their frustration is not rooted in jealousy or poor sportsmanship. It is rooted in a genuine belief that when one competitor has meaningfully more preparation time on the most preparation-dependent course in professional golf, the starting line is not the same for everyone, even if the tee time on Thursday morning appears identical. The conversation that is building informally among players is not yet an official complaint or a formal grievance.
Ow.
Nobody is filing paperwork or demanding rule changes. What is happening is more organic than that, and in some ways more significant. Because organic conversations among players are how cultural shifts in professional sports actually begin. The ideas being floated include greater transparency around pre-tournament access at major venues, clearer informal norms about how much private preparation time is appropriate, and potentially broader discussions at the PGA Tour level about what competitive fairness should look like in the modern era of professional golf. The Tour does not govern Augusta National, and everyone involved understands that. But the Tour does shape the broader culture of the professional game. And culture is ultimately what drives expectations. The counter-argument is legitimate and worth engaging with honestly. Golf has always been a sport where relationships open doors. Getting invited to play Augusta National as a touring professional is a privilege that flows from reputation, from relationships cultivated over years, and from the simple reality that elite golfers move in circles where those opportunities occasionally present themselves. If an invitation arrives, accepting it is not a moral failing. It is intelligent preparation. Veterans of the game who hold this view are not dismissing the concerns of their peers. They are applying a framework that has governed professional golf for generations. one that says the responsibility for finding every possible competitive edge rests with the individual player and the team around him. Nobody is owed equal access to a private club. You earn your opportunities, or you cultivate the relationships that produce them. That perspective has genuine weight, and it reflects something true about the culture of golf at its highest level. But it also reflects a version of the sport that is increasingly in tension with where the modern game is heading. Today's professional golfers are more analytically sophisticated, more systematically prepared, and more acutely aware of marginal advantages than any generation that preceded them. They track every data point. They optimize every variable. They can control. When they identify a structural asymmetry in how players are able to prepare for the most important tournaments on the calendar, they are not going to quietly accept it as tradition. They are going to talk about it, push back against it, and eventually apply enough collective pressure that something shifts, whether that shift comes in the form of formal policy or informal norms. If Rory McIlroy wins the Masters this week, and based on where things stand, that outcome is genuinely plausible, this conversation will not dissolve in the celebration. It will intensify. Sports media will carry it forward. The players who have been speaking quietly will feel emboldened to speak more directly. And the institutions of professional golf will be forced to at least acknowledge the question publicly. Even if the answers they provide are unsatisfying or incomplete, that is how these conversations work. They begin at the margins, gather momentum through individual voices, and eventually arrive at a place where ignoring them is no longer a viable option. Where this lands, personally, is a place of real ambiguity, which feels like the honest position to hold. Rory McIlroy did nothing wrong. That statement should be the foundation of any fair assessment of this situation. He accepted opportunities that were extended to him, prepared as thoroughly as his circumstances allowed, and showed up at Augusta National ready to compete at the highest possible level. That is what championship-caliber athletes do, and there is nothing to criticize in any of it. And yet the advantage that flows from multiple private rounds at Augusta before the tournament is not a minor one. It is substantial, and substantial advantages that are available to some players and not others. At the most knowledge-dependent course in professional golf, represent a tension that the sport probably needs to address with more intentionality than it currently applies. Tradition and competitive integrity are not fundamentally incompatible values. The history and exclusivity of Augusta National are part of what make the Masters the singular event that it is. And protecting those qualities is genuinely important for the health of the tournament and the sport. But transparency is not the enemy of tradition. Creating clearer norms around pre-tournament access, or at least acknowledging openly that such access exists and carries competitive implications, does not diminish what Augusta represents. Simply adds a layer of accountability that the modern era of professional golf reasonably demands. The players raising these concerns are not trying to dismantle something sacred. They are asking whether the competitive stage at the sport's most prestigious event is as level as it should be. That is a question worth taking seriously, and this weekend at Augusta is as good a moment as any to start taking it seriously out loud.